Good evening. Welcome to Westport Election Countdown, brought to you by Westport Community TV. I'm Irene Buck, and I'm filling in tonight for Jim Coyne, who has been doing this for a long time and needed a little rest tonight. Jim was a former Westport selectman. He was a very active member of our community and actually the first chair of the Westport Capel Advisory Committee. So I guess partly that's the reason I'm here tonight. I am the current chair, and one of the most important things I think that local TV can do is to keep people informed. So a little later tonight, we're not exactly sure, we're going to be able to get information on the election and the people that now will be considered our leaders, our influencers, and fill the slots that are missing, and probably of equal or more importance decision on how we're going to be funding the Diamond addition. Tonight I have the outstanding leader of our Board of Selectmen, Shauna Sheffield, here. We're going to talk about elections and about democracy and about being involved in your community. And Betty Slade, who is probably an outstanding example of somebody who never stops helping Westport. She's working night and day, I think, in the cemetery even, to keep us up and going. And that's really what makes this town work. I didn't grow up in a small town, and I think it's just so wonderful to see what can happen when you're in a town where everybody really can make a difference. And the numbers of people that volunteer is huge.
Oh, yeah.
I asked for a printout of all the people, and I think it probably took her an hour and a half to print it all out of the names. I'll show you the pile of names. So anyway, Shauna, what's happened today? What's gonna make a difference in this election?
So I think the most important thing on the ballot today is the question one, which is whether to fund for the Diamond School project from excluded debt, or whether we have to put it in the operating budget. To me, this is going to be the most impactful decision on the ballot that people will make today. The town meeting overwhelmingly agreed to support this Diamond School Building project. It's an exceptionally good value. The state is a $293 million project. Our share is about $7.5 million of that. The school itself is just phenomenal for our whole community, the economic development. It's not just about the students, it's about the future tradespeople that are coming out of there and the economic opportunities they're going to have for the region, right? So I think we got a really good deal with the MSBA funding. We're sharing this cost with partnerships, but our share when we're up to full bonding is going to be about $450,000. No one really wants to vote to increase taxes, but if you don't increase your taxes, the $450,000, we're going to have to decrease our services by $450,000. And that's a lot. That's like 9-10 people. Most of our town budget is staff, and so if you're going to cut service, you're going to have to cut 8-9 people, and where are they going to come from?
Well, when we talk about taxes, we forget that it's about things that we're buying. We're actually getting. Now, Betty represents free labor. You have contributed, I would say millions. I won't say billions, but millions, because you're a very experienced person. You don't come in and dust the furniture once a week.
Every once in a while.
You come in and put your brain to work, and I wasn't making fun of that. It's critical to have people that keep things nice, but you bring an academic background, you bring a lot of experience, and you put that to work. And if we had to sit down and pay for that, we'd have to think about it long and hard, because we struggle with whether we can pay for somebody to clear the snow off the road.
One thing I don't think people understand about people like Betty and David Cole and some of the other really notable people that are volunteering their time around town is how much money they actually bring into Westport. Because it's not just, I wouldn't even want to have to pay Betty for the volunteer hours that she's put in, but they also do a lot of grant writing. They do a lot of beating the bushes to get donors for different programs. They do a lot of coordination with other entities like the Land Conservation Trust and Buzzards Bay Coalition and the Watershed Alliance. Like, our volunteers aren't just like hands-on doing stuff, which is amazing that they're doing that, but they're bringing real dollars in also.
and
And I think a
that's-
lot of people don't see that.
That's not talked about, because I know at the Council on Aging, such a small amount of taxpayer dollars goes to support the budget that provides services for seniors, people who need extra help in their life, people who need some exercise. Most of the money comes from grants that are the state contribution, national contribution, organizations like ARP, and without a staff person to make sure that that happens, we'd be wondering what we were going to do. Those are services that a lot of people can't really live without. Betty, talk about why Westport has gotten your attention. You've been really working on projects ever since I met you 20 years ago. Hard.
We bought our property in 1988, so it's been a long time, but we didn't move here until 2001. We moved permanently here, and that was a decision that we made. I don't know, I think when I looked around at my environment, it started out really because I live at the Point and it's historic. And so I got interested in my house, the history of my house, and then my neighbors' houses, and all down the road. And then people started coming to me and saying, would you do our house, and so forth. And then I started getting involved with the Historical Society. So that, they don't work for the town as such, but they work for the town, the whole town, in the sense of preserving history. And so I got very interested in that and worked a lot on purchasing the handy house, that kind of thing, and then got into cemetery work, which is a very long story. But I sort of fell into
We have
things.
a lot of time.
I fell into things. I was seeing a need,
Yeah.
and so many people do that. They see a need. But there's one thing about volunteers, Irene, is there's so many different people out there who have different capacities and also different things they want to do.
Right.
It's rare that anyone wants to be on a committee. They don't want to be on a committee. They certainly don't want to lead a committee.
It's so hard to have to sit and listen to other people talk. You have to do that at home.
Well, listening to
sometimes.
yourself is hard enough. I mean, one just listening to oneself. No, but I'm saying that generally, if I start a project, I ask people to come in and say, "What do you want to do?" And then they say, "Well, I want to clean gravestones." And so, okay, well, let's find a way to clean gravestones, which we did. So even among the young people, we had a student, Andrew Isidoro, who came as a senior, and he worked with me for 5 years. He went on to get a master's degree, and he worked on the gravestone issue, the cemetery issue, registered cemeteries, and all of that.
Tell us, because we have time, the polls are just closing. Tell us why Westport needs to be concerned about its cemeteries and its headstones. We're all alive. I mean, it's not necessarily something we're all thinking about right now.
Well, it all started with somebody, a contractor who took stones away from a cemetery up the road. He was caught. We went to court, and I followed it very closely to court. We lost actually in the court, the town, but the judge made it hard on them, made them restore all the stones.
And this was an old cemetery.
Yes, this is probably from 1712. We think it was Jeremiah DeWall. We think so. And so once that happened, I was wondering, why did we lose? So I went to the lawyer, actually, and said, can you tell me why we lost? And it took a little while, and he said the cemetery wasn't registered. So crazily enough, I came to the Board of Selectmen, this was years ago, 15 years ago, and said, I'd like to register the cemeteries, is that okay? And they said, sure. I thought like there were 4 or 5. Well, it turned out to be 106. And it turned out to be a massive plan, but I had so much help. Paul Pannoni joined me immediately, Pete Baker at the time, Geraldine Millam, Andrew Isidoro, and Gary Harstad, who did we have a beautiful website, westportmacemetery.org, westportmacemetery.org, which still, the town now is beginning to take over. I don't know if you know that. But we're working with the town administrator to have the town take over this website because the cemetery department uses it, the world uses it, the veterans agent uses it.
Can I just step in and like pony up that question that you asked, Betty? So why is it important to save the cemeteries, right?
Good.
Because the other thing that Betty's really been involved in is the CPC, and I think a lot of people don't really understand.
Spell that out.
Community Preservation
Okay.
Commission. So she can explain it much better than I can. But I think a lot of people, they come to Westport and they see the farms, they see the old houses down at the point. You go across the 88 bridge and you look at the harbor and you're like, wow, that is just beautiful. And you see the stone walls and the cows and the crops growing. It takes real effort to keep Westport like that. It is only because people like Betty got involved to save and preserve their community that we actually see that. And I think a lot of people don't stay connected to it. It's that love, people who really love the history, who really want to make sure that we're supporting the farmers in a way that's sustainable.
Right.
That you can help the environment at the same time you're helping the farmers and things like that. I think so much of what people love about Westport when they drive around, you don't really think of active volunteers making that happen, but that's exactly what they're doing.
And also elections, because this conversation is really what's the character of our town and how can it continue? Because what you did probably wouldn't have happened.
Well, the
Lots
CPC,
of
did you start that or was that
No, the
somebody else?
CPC was started in 2002, and the purpose of it really was to save farms and natural spaces, but also to set up the Westport Youth Athletic Association playing fields.
It's an extraordinary decision at the
It was
state level,
extraordinary.
because the collaboration between history and recreation is not a natural.
And affordable housing.
And when you're at this legislature, you're not thinking about who strangely can I collaborate with to make new legislation possible. And it is something people contribute through their taxes.
Yes,
to keep it happening.
2% of their tax
Yeah.
bill. It's not very much money
No.
for what they get for true. And the state also gives us money each year. In the first years, because Westport was early in this, we got 100% for several years.
So every time the town made a pot of money, the state
The state
matched
would
it.
contribute to it, and they've contributed about $3.9 million to date.
And
to it.
by using that money to preserve and protect and make possible the whole character of what we're all about. You know, we're talking eventually tonight about people voting. They're voting to maintain a town. They're voting to maintain values. And like you said, people just assume it automatically looks this way, but clearly it doesn't.
Well, for example, we always said that CPC is the seed, the seed, and then it grows because we have other organizations coming in like the Historical Society or the Land Trust or the farmers or whoever else is interested. And a good portion of the funding comes from private funds.
Yeah.
And so you have a combination of volunteers, the town, the state, to do things for you in Westport. This is Westport. We protect the farms. We've protected about 8 farms, large ones, some of them. Lots of open space, and that's been a combination of the Land Trust. They contributed a huge amount of money and the organization for all of this. I'm really thankful to them. So I think that this combination of the private sector, the nonprofits, and the town, CPC is one example of how that works. But there are other examples.
But I think when people start talking about taxes and what it costs, it's easy to forget that we have these structures that really stretch money much, much farther than it would ever go. If we had to increase our taxes to cover all of the projects that came out of these joint
you couldn't do
projects,
it.
Couldn't be done.
we'd all sit there and hope. That's
couldn't.
about as far as it would go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I mean, when you're talking about, you can kind of bring it back to elections, right?
Yeah.
A lot of Westport has really benefited from a really good. I think we have a really active state delegation who is helping us get our share of state money. I still think it's off. I think we should. I think they cut us too much and didn't bring us back quick enough. But I think we've got a delegation that really is looking out for particularly special projects that we have to do, like the Route 6 corridor project. We've got some work going down at the Hicks Bridge Landing. You've got a lot of the Horseneck Beach development that's gone on. So I think that it doesn't show up in the operating budget, but it shows up in other project budgets and the ways that we're able to preserve things. But I think that I'm really glad that Betty mentioned the private donations, because you forget that it's people are volunteering, but people are bringing out their checkbooks and writing
Yes.
checks
Yes.
that because they believe in preserving Westport,
Right.
right? And so it's hard, but it's really hard to make for people to understand. Yes, please raise my taxes, but I think a lot of people don't really realize how much how much they each benefit, because other people are not only willing to raise their taxes, they're willing to open up their checkbooks and donate money to these causes.
Must be a lot of things you've realized or learned being a select person. Why don't you let us get behind the curtain a little and talk about what is it like to...
For example, today I saw on Facebook,
Yeah.
they were talking about the police.
Yeah.
And I thought your response was very good today. They were talking about the salaries
Yeah.
of the police, and in general, everybody, it was interesting, everybody was supporting the police and trying to explain it. And then she comes along.
They were supporting the police and trying to explain it, but they were complaining about how much money the police officers make. Right?
Yes.
So what happened is there was a local newspaper published income for all public employees' salaries, right? And I don't remember the exact number, but if you talk the top 10, top 20, they're all police officers, or top 10 or 20. And so people are like, why are police officers making so much money? And the reason they're making so much money is because they are doing a lot of overtime and a lot of detail work. And not all that money is taxation. Some of that money is coming from, if you have a private company, cutting trees or whatever, they're hiring a detail and they're paying for it, right? So, but people were kind of bemoaning the amount of money that was spent. But then I just pointed them to the actual budget that actually showed how much we're appropriating for the police, and it is the single biggest line item in our budget is the school department, the community schools. The second is the police department. The third is the fire department. The fourth is the regional schools. And then you kind of go down. Highway is the only other any sizable department. But sure, your school department, your police, fire, highway, regional schools, yeah, those are your top ones.
Very measurable.
But think about your police and fire.
Yeah.
So police and fire, we are 64 square miles.
Yes.
We're
Big.
long. We're a big town. We have a
Yeah.
lot of mileage on the street mileage out there. And we have 28 full-time police officers. So you think about covering 24/7 with 28 officers. And then you've got investigations, and you've got they have to go to court, they have training. We have people deployed in the military right now. We had somebody who was injured on duty when she was on shift. So when you're at tight staffing and you are trying to cover so much area, yeah, some of those guys are making a lot of money, but they're making a lot of money working a lot of hours.
Yes, yes.
And the other thing that didn't come up in that particular thread, but the other thing that people come up with a lot is people talk about the fire department, and they say, well, we don't get that many fires. And first of all, it's not that true. We actually get more fires than you might think. But second of all, those ambulances are out all the time. That ambulance don't stop. And our coverage is higher than it has ever been for the number of calls that we're getting. Every firefighter that we have is a paramedic. And I don't know about you, but I really want a paramedic to show up if I need them, right? So,
But it's really nice when the fire department comes if you have a fire. And we have lived here over 20 years, and we never had a fire, but we had a fire. And they arrived.
They
And
come when you
it
need
was worth every penny I've ever paid.
There's one other thing, like kind of relating to services, not just the fire department, but we had an example where there's a new proposed development going in that the abutters are not that happy about.
Right.
And the select board has an opportunity to make comments to the planning board. So the whole group of people came to the select board meeting to encourage us to negatively comment on the plan. And we kept repeatedly telling them, all we're doing is making recommendations to the planning board. You really want to go to the planning board and go air your problems there. But what was so interesting to me is the things that they brought up that they were worried about. They were worried about speeding. They were worried about people driving dangerously. So first of all, that would be really helpful to have a police officer in the vicinity, right? So maybe we should be funding some police officers. Everybody who complains about speeders, I tell them we only have like 2 or 3 details at any one time. So we got to go where they need them, right? They were complaining about the building inspector, that it took a long time to get building inspection. We have one building inspector, right? So sure, it depends. I think he does as good a job as he can do, but he's only one guy. They were complaining about something with a conservation agent not coming out. Again, we only have one.
Yeah.
We have one conservation agent. And so many of these things that they were talking about directly are related to staffing problems that we have in town, right? But then I encouraged all of them, and they're valid issues. I don't want to, they're valid issues they were bringing up, but I said, all of you, please stay when we're talking about our budget, because these are exactly the ways that our budget and how we appropriate money affects you in your real life. Right, and none of them stayed. I think one person stayed.
Do you think it's the size of a budget that scares people away? Because they're all basically our services. We're not really doing fancy things. There's been nobody painting
We're not doing fancy things because we don't have any money.
Look around the rooms.
Well, you know what
it is, Betty.
I got a lot of criticism though, because for the last year, what I've been saying to people, and that they really don't like it when I talk to them personally, I say, fine. If you don't want to raise your taxes, okay, fine. We don't raise your taxes. Let's cut services. So here's your optional services that are all on the chopping block that we have to consider, every one of them. The recreation department. I think they're doing amazing things over there.
Job.
That recreation department is doing fabulous things for our community, but it is completely 100% optional.
Yep.
And it's not self-supporting. Library.
Yeah.
When I started on the finance committee, we weren't funding up to the state minimum level for certification for the library. We don't have to do that. We can cut services at the library. Council on Aging. We can cut Council on Aging. It's not required. We don't have to have it. I think we should have it.
Yeah, it's critical.
It's critical for the community. Recreation is really important for the community. The library is really important. The Council on Aging is important. The transfer station, we don't have to have that. Let's cut it, right? So if you don't want to raise your taxes on this diamond vote tonight or on the override vote that we're going to be having, fine, please tell me what to cut.
Yeah.
I don't know what to cut.
And that's really what I think you've learned most of all with your time on the Finance Committee. You don't have the answers, the community has the answers.
I have the answer. The reason that you're not getting speeders on your street is because we don't have enough police officers. The reason that your building inspector might be taking longer than you'd like is because we don't have enough. The reason that the animal control is not 24/7 is because we do not have enough money. That is the reason. I think what I thought going into government in the first place was that government doesn't spend their money wisely. But you think that government is just a waste, and you think that, you hear it a lot like at the federal level, they're spending billions of dollars on stuff, and it becomes not real anymore because it's billions of dollars, right? But when you actually sharpen your pencil and you look and talk through each line item in our budget, we are on a shoestring here. It is amazing that we have employees that can actually do as much as they do with the money that they have. Particularly when we had COVID, and so you had a lot of people out on medical leave, or you had people that had to quarantine. It's amazing that we were able to keep the services running, and it's through hard. We have a lot of volunteer work, but we have a lot of really good employees that are just making do.
And you can add to that, Irene, is what we call the unfunded mandates.
Yes.
The things that are coming down from the state or the feds that the same person has to do. I mean, the one person who did something 20 years ago is doing 50 things now, with the same The same, sometimes technology, and just one or two people. It's remarkable. I'm here a lot in this building, and I see it. I see the work that they're doing.
Well, we're so separate. You know, we write our own check for our taxes. We don't really come in and look at what people are doing.
I think a lot of people were so disconnected from the government because they're not writing a check for their taxes. I literally mean this. It's coming out of your mortgage statement, right? You've got it in escrow in your mortgage.
Yes, a good
You're not
point.
paying. I'm not paying a quarterly tax bill. My mortgage company is paying.
So magically,
right? So you lose track of how much of your income is being spent here in Westport, and you're not even paying attention to it. Most people.
So how do we get back to connecting people with the value that they place on living here? Because most people I know like living here.
Yes.
Their upsets come with those leaders didn't do something that I wanted them to do, or just the general idea that it's my money and somebody's spending it. I remember a long time ago, you know, if you don't want to spend it on war, what are you going to spend it on? Your federal taxes, you're going to cut your check and only give money so much to where you want. Well, you can't do that. And yet the conversation always is, I don't want to pay for this, but I'm going to pay for that. How do we get people talking about what they're actually getting in the sense of community? You can't find a place like Westport very easily anymore. People are filling the spaces that exist, but how can you get people more engaged in democracy really is the bigger question, and do what they're supposed to have done today. I'm hoping everybody watching us tonight has voted, and they will be part of the count. But how do you get people more involved? Is it through volunteering, seeing up close?
Well, if you see a problem, try to go and solve it. I mean,
Or find an answer.
Oh, yeah, what I'm saying is, yes,
Yeah.
you see it, and so you ask, and you try to get in there and help. This is the way that I see it. I don't immediately believe that I'm being cheated or it's fraudulent. I don't have that attitude. I have an attitude that people are trying to do their best, and if they aren't succeeding, why don't I go in and see what I can do to help? You know, a lot of people don't have the time. I mean,
Exactly.
People work, they've got children and so forth. But it's interesting, I think the parents do see more,
Yes.
because they want the schools to be good. This is, very important. And so they look around a lot more and pay attention, and they get active, which I'm very pleased with, because
Yes.
good things happen. A
Well,
lot of
you know,
other
we-
people
we
think they
sort of
can't make a difference.
Push the schools off when your kids are grown and you're not really using the schools. But again, we live in a democracy. People have to be literate.
I would love for the people who I'm interacting with on a day-to-day basis know how to read and write and do basic math, right? I want to be able to go to the grocery
They
store.
can even add.
And like it isn't just about, like, our community will crumble if nobody's educated at all, right? I mean, we learned that a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I think, so one of my, like, when I get up on my soapbox about how important voting is, I think I really love what Betty said is, I don't like it, I really, as the local leader who gets criticized, right? If somebody comes and starts yelling at me, I'm really not that inclined to pay that much attention to
Yes.
them. I really, like, if you're just coming at me, yelling at me about how I'm getting kickbacks and bribes, how much time do I really want to spend with you? Right. But if you come in and ask me, hey, why is this line item in the police budget look so high? I'm happy to have those conversations.
Absolutely.
And I think that, I think there's a couple things that just individuals have to take some responsibility for. And the first thing is, a lot of people complain that they don't know what is going on, but they're not making any effort to find out what is going on. And the single best way that you can find out that there was an election today is to subscribe to the Shorelines or the Herald News. You have to, if you have any prayer of understanding, like an independent perspective, what is going on in your government, you have to subscribe to your local papers. I don't even care if you read them. I'm serious about that. They have to be able to pay a reporter to tell you what's going on in the planning board and tell you what's going on with the cell phone tower and tell you that there's a diamond vote, right? Now, second, I would like you to read the paper you just subscribed to. But the third thing, whatever number I'm on now, The other thing is that your vote has so much more power
Right.
in a local election
Yeah.
Right.
than it does in the presidential election. So in the Trump-Biden election, there were over 7,000 people who voted in Westport in the Trump-Biden election. On a state ballot where you have, where I think Senator Rodriguez, there's maybe 80,000 people will vote for him or in that state Senate race. There's about 30,000 people that'll vote for Paul Schmidt or the representative race. But last year's local election, we had 535 people voted. In a regular town election, we'll get maybe 2,000. If we get a turnout tonight of more than 2,000 people, that'll be a really good turnout.
Yes.
And what that means, and then even go further, at town meeting, you'll be lucky if 250 people are at town meeting. So if you are one of 2,000 people, your vote is weighted pretty high.
Very,
right?
yeah.
And if you're one of 250 that's at town meeting, it's weighted really high.
Yeah.
So you have a disproportionate impact in your local community just because you show up and vote. But the second thing is, in a local context, you actually can have coffee with your representatives.
Yes.
You can call me up and say, Shauna, can we meet for coffee or wine? And I'll be there, okay? And you could call our state senator or state rep, arrange a meeting. You can meet with them. Like, we're real people. We live here near you. And we hear from so few people that the people that reach out to us really get our attention,
Yeah,
right? So
right.
if you have a cause that's important to you and you're not really sure how to help, I would say contact me, contact one of the other select board members. One of my favorite things to do is to refer people to other people. And I'll say, you know what, I don't know anything about that, but talk to Betty, because Betty knows everything. And maybe Betty doesn't have
Now
an answer
you
for
know
this
why
one,
you
but
get
Betty-
all those phone calls.
Or like, somebody's interested in the cultural council, I'll be like, I'm not really sure what's going on, talk to Irene.
Yeah.
Right, and so, like, if you're interested at all, talk to somebody, talk to me, send me an email. I'm happy, I meet with people whenever they ask, and we'll put you in touch with people.
Beginning to get people to think positively is building community.
Yeah.
And having ways that people can talk to each other, which I think a little of these broadcasts help to do, so that they begin to realize that having a positive conversation is a positive thing. It's a really good thing. It's not necessarily helpful to be screaming at each other all the time. And I think that's why people volunteer, because they get involved in things that they really like to do and they can learn. I've learned everything that I've gotten involved with since we moved here. It's just so educational, not necessarily moving in the direction I want unless I keep working. And that, I think, is what you've learned as a volunteer. You have to keep working for
And
those
you
changes.
meet new people too. You meet a lot of people. And even if you go into areas you don't know much about, like I'm, interested in farming, so there are a couple of farmers that I talk to a lot. And I learn a lot, and I learn the problems. And then you get more understanding, and then you can see things differently. I think that communication is extremely important.
We probably don't have vehicles for people to actually just come and sit down and talk about the things that are, because life moves so fast.
I think the single easiest is reach out to an individual, reach out to a select board member, reach out to somebody and just say, hey, can we have coffee? I really do believe that there's a lot of power there. You have your own powerful voice that way, and then you can get connected with other things that are going on. And I do think the more you work together, the more work you're doing, the more engaged in your community you're going to be, right? So whatever it is that interests you, even like finance committee. Like, I was on the finance committee for a long time. You think, you have to be an accountant or you have to be a CPA or something. No, you don't. You just have to have a curiosity about the budget. You have to be a curiosity about what's going on.
And be willing to give some time.
It takes time.
That's precious. That's really precious.
Yeah,
but I
time.
think that's it. And listen to other people. Because we don't want it to be a rosy thing that you get on a committee and it just sort of bounces along. It's work. It's work. And sometimes you don't agree with other people. But I think if you're going to live somewhere with others, you can live alone. There probably are a few people in town that live alone, don't bother with the rest of us. But if you're going to live with other people, it's a real joy to get to know them and try to work with them in the ways. I mean, people who are elected to office have to do that. That's one of the unique characteristics of a town leader.
I think one of the, so when I ran for select board in 2016, I ran on communication and collaboration and problem solving, right? That is what I ran on. And I'm really glad that I ran on those three things because I was elected in April. In July, we found out about the Madeira's Farm animal cruelty case.
Okay.
I didn't run on animal cruelty. I wasn't, I mean, I'm anti-animal cruelty. It wasn't even an issue that I cared about. It wasn't on my radar. You know, obviously I care about animals being abused, but I didn't know anything about it. I knew nothing. So I had to learn. I had to be really curious, and I had to figure out who are the people who are learning, who are the people on one side of the issue, and what do they think, and what are the other people on the other side of the issue think. So, you know, coming back to elections, I think one of the most important things you can do is look at how if a person has a curiosity mindset, a growth and learning mindset, I think is so important because I've seen people come in and say, we're going to do this when I'm a select board member. Like, you know what? You're only 20% of the select board. So you're not going to get anywhere if you just come in and you're going to, you know, you might have an exceptionally good idea, but you still have to collaborate with people.
Exactly.
You still have to listen with people. You still have to gain a coalition around you. And I think when you're looking for candidates for any office, it's really important to look for that. You don't want somebody who knows everything going in. You want somebody who's going to be curious going in and who's going to learn and who brings some expertise or some
Right.
qualifications, but who is willing to admit that they don't know everything.
I think that's a good lead-in to change, and we've all lived here for enough time. We've seen the town change a little bit, not very much. I think that's kind of the pride of these towns. You don't see change happen unless you drive down
There's a lot
a
of
street
change
like
that's
yours.
happened.
But change is really important for people to understand, and change has to cost money. I mean, it costs people going to court to fight it. That's what I see in the paper. We're not going to do this, and it's not going to happen, and so it becomes. But how can we better understand and accept change when we're looking for leaders? When we're looking for direction?
Let Betty answer that.
Well, there are certain changes that a lot of people don't want, but maybe one or two do. And one example was the cell tower at the corner of Drift and 88. And the vast majority of people didn't want it, but a couple did because they wanted to use AT&T, and they couldn't get AT&T. But actually, that cell tower is going to be very helpful to the people on the beach. I mean, it's the tourists coming in that are going, we should get more money from the state because of that, by the way. Just tell them, we've now given, you know, cell coverage to the people at the beach, and therefore we should have our income for state.
I'd
for
like to
pilot.
listen to that conversation.
Can I just say to this though, Betty and I are good friends, right? I consider Betty a good friend of mine, but I voted against her on that issue, right? But because I had to take into account my role and responsibility and what I thought was the best thing for the future of the town, and Betty was advocating for what she thought was the best thing in town. But I think that ability to be on the opposite sides of the issue and still kind of understand, yeah, I didn't like the way that went,
Right.
but
And that's
it's not
not-
over because of that.
That's-
right? I think
no.
we need to learn how to keep doing that.
That has to be part of why the town has lived so long, you know, has existed so long, because people have figured out a way. You win sometimes, I win
Yeah.
sometimes, and both of us are on the same side
Yeah.
sometimes. But I think that tower is a big example of change. Your husband
Yeah.
is very involved in seeing what we can do about getting better internet in this town.
Right.
And that tower was a representation of
Yeah,
that.
it was.
It's what young people have to have, old people have to have, I guess, I don't know. But it's a symbol. There's other symbols, I think. When you want to make the town accessible to people, there's places where if you have a walker, it's pretty hard to get around in this town. But those issues have to be brought to the different offices in town for planning, for the select people to decide, and they end up costing money. And so if our attitude is we're not going to spend any money, we're really not going to be able to change. We're not going to be able to move forward.
I think the thing about, everybody watches their money, right? And I think and I have to say, I'm much more careful with the town's money than I am my personal money, right? Because it's not mine,
Good,
right?
good.
I'm a caretaker. I'm doing my part, right? But change, people talk about change being bad. There's a lot of change that is very good
Yes.
that has happened, right?
Yes.
And so, like, I think it's knowing where you have to make investments. Because I hear, one of the things I hear a lot about related to the school building project was, well, why did we we should have just taken care of the buildings that we had. Yes, you're right. We should take care of the buildings we had. So where was that in the budget? Those kind of, the schools department did a great job maintaining the buildings that they had. But you look around this building, this building is terrible. When you walk into it,
We're in town hall, in
We're-
case you didn't notice.
this building is so, it looks like it's from the 40s and a whole bunch of junk thrown in here. It is not, I don't want it to be a modern, I want it to be historic, but I also want it to serve its function, right? And so, but the money to make improvements on the building, to maybe expand it, to maybe improve some of the systems in there, it just keeps putting down the road because people don't want to spend money. And so eventually you have to spend a lot of money instead of spending enough
Catch up.
all along,
You have to
right?
catch
so
up.
I think, a lot of people are like, well, why weren't we just maintaining the buildings? Because we stole and borrowed every penny we could from anything optional for many years, and it caught up with us.
There isn't a total agreement on how we're going to move forward into the future, how we're going to deal with change. And that, I think, is part of people not sitting down and saying, the town is an old town, represents stone walls, represents farms, but it also represents people that are on the internet all the time, working across the country, and they wouldn't live any other way.
Your fiber optic,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sure. I mean, I actually think that high-speed internet access helps towns like Westport because we don't have a lot of commutable options. I mean, a lot of people talk about the age of our population skews our demographic skews kind of old, right? But part of that is because we're not really in commutable distance to a whole lot of employers.
Right.
So, like, I go 45 minutes to my employer, which isn't a terrible commute, but if you're going to Boston or Waltham or something, you're talking an hour and a half commute, right?
Yeah.
So we're not a very good commuter location. So for young professional type people, we're pretty out of it. But now that you're having more opportunities to work from home, if you have the infrastructure to support that, now we're kind of opening up opportunities where maybe younger people or people in a different part of their life cycle can come to Westport and stay and live in Westport. Because I think that those kinds of things are investment in the community that people really want when you kind of say, hey, would you like more reliable high-speed internet? And nobody says, oh no, I don't want that.
Well, and people that have lived here a long time want the value of their home to grow. And if people want to live here, you're willing to spend a little bit more, and it's a lot more for people that have lived here 40 years. Their house has increased in amazing value. I want to talk a little bit about elections because I went to vote today, and I had this amazing chat with the warden that was overseeing the voting, making sure that everything. Talk about a long day. They get in there sometimes at 4:30 in the morning, but starting at 6 o'clock and work until every single ballot is counted. We talked about volunteers. Well, these people get a stipend, so they
The
kind
workers
of
get
are,
paid, but not a lot.
a tiny amount of money to make a commitment that our elections run well, and our conversation was all about that. But the work that we expect of people that is behind the curtain really does get forgotten. And I think it's important to vote. It's important to know what you're voting on. It's important to have conversations like we're talking about. Why are people doing this? Could it all be done by volunteers? But it's really important to recognize the people that are putting in those 12-hour days to make sure that when I vote, it's recorded
You're
properly.
really seeing on the national level now, you're seeing so much more local government getting the spotlight, right? You're seeing with all the talk over the last years about elections, right?
Mm-hmm.
The town clerks, nobody paid much attention to a town clerk until you need a marriage license, right?
Yeah.
Or birth certificate.
Right.
But now people understand, wait, town clerks actually have a critical
Right.
role here, right?
Right.
And school committees, you see all this in the national news about school committees. Those are local elected people.
Yes.
And so, and then you look at, you can go on to state legislatures. A lot of really big decisions are happening at the state legislatures. And it's more important than ever to pay attention closer to home. Like, yes, the federal stuff is important, you know, those things are important, but right at home, you can make an impact.
Well,
So back to elections, we just recently had the problem here that Bernadette retired, and we didn't have anybody to run the elections.
Yeah.
And so there had to be some adjustments to that. Just think of that.
yeah.
There's nobody in town working who has a
Or
can do
we
elections.
had the town clerk
Or
retire.
has
Yeah, this was really happened. yeah.
The town clerk retired. We had just hired an assistant town clerk. So that assistant town clerk had only been in office for like a week
Right.
before Bernadette was supposed to leave.
Yes.
And then we had a consultant who was going to come in, and that fell through. But now we're like, wouldn't be able to run an election at all. And the assistant clerk is on the ballot tonight, so she couldn't have been involved in the election tonight. We really were
Yeah,
up
it was
against
serious.
it. Like, we really owe Bernadette Oliver
Yes.
a really
Thank you.
like warm thank you
Yes.
for doing this, because this whole thing couldn't have happened unless somebody with the experience to step up and run the election did it. And we're very fortunate that Bernadette.
Well,
did that.
you know, there's people who are employed here, there's people who are volunteers, and I asked for a list of volunteers, and the list went on and on and on. I'm going to hold it up just so people can see. These are people that are all small print, probably not going to be able to read it, I'm not going to read it, but these people are the people that really have, you know, go behind all of that. But then we have employees, and like you said, Bernadette, I have a list here. I think there was 5 people that retired this year from their police. I have the list right here. Here we go.
And from the schools.
Yeah.
We have 2 people who worked for the Council on Aging, Robin Ezito and Catherine Lynch. They were both employees. One served 10 years and one 8. Bernadette Oliver has been here 23 years. David Letty and Thomas Lord are police, 24 years and 33 years. That's a long commitment to our town, and I think we should have, you know, really be able to acknowledge that. And that long, big pile of paper that I had with all of those people that have worked on committees, I think at the same time, it makes a big difference. And being willing to work 23 years and then add, what, 6 months?
And I think a lot of people have this, I did before I came in, you have this illusion that government employees get all kinds of benefits. Like their salary might not be that great, but their benefits are amazing.
Yes.
And I would say that is completely false. Like in Westport, our town employees pay 50% of their health insurance. I'll bet you, most of you with private employers are not paying 50% of your health insurance.
That's right.
And the town employees, there's different levels. They do get more vacation days and more holidays than I would get in the private sector. But that's only really because we don't have money to offer them.
Yeah.
And so we don't have money to increase their pay. And so you end up saying, all right, let's take another day off, because you have to compensate these people in some way. And if you don't have the money for it, then how else are you going to do it?
Let's talk about we don't have money. We have not, as a town, voted to have enough money in the bank to be able to make more, put more money out there. We're talking about looking at that at the May town meeting. We're saying there is an opportunity to increase the money that comes into the town through tax.
So I just want to
That
minor
nasty
correction.
little word.
So there's a lot of confusion about the override. But okay, so the diamond vote, we're going to know in an hour or more. We'll know how the diamond vote went down. Probably, hopefully, less than an hour. The override, what's going to happen at town meeting is you're going to get Article 5, which is the regular budget that is balanced and can be met with available funding, right? Then you're going to get Article 6, which is here's where we would add money if an override passes. But there is no question about an override at town meeting. That is not going to be voted on town meeting. What town meeting is going to do is say, hey, if we support an override in the future, here's how we want the money to be spent. So So it's the appropriation subject to an override. We are not voting on an override at town.
So if you were going out shopping for a car and you were in a dealer's lot and he showed you this car at this price and this car with all kinds of special features and additions at a different price, that's basically what we're doing. We're looking at two options.
We're looking at the option, well, so we have to fund a balanced budget. There's no question about that. We have to fund a balanced budget.
So
of
we
the
have
base
to
operating
have
budget.
that
So that's
in
your
place.
base model, right? So the base model we have to pay today. To
Okay.
try to use your analogy, then I'm going to try to do this really quickly. If I want, 6 other features on this car, I can pay more money, but I'm not going to be able to get it for a few more months.
Okay.
Right. So it's kind of like signing. I'm buying my base model now, but I can get more features if I agree to pay more later.
Right.
But there's some other articles on the ballot though related to. So we do have an article on the warrant for the town
Why
meeting.
don't we finish
Yeah, go
the
ahead.
override though? So what happens, whether this passes or not, whether or not people accept it, the Board of Selectmen will make a decision whether or not there will be an override.
Right.
So the Board of Selectmen alone make that decision.
Yes.
And then there would be a special election.
Right.
And what are the basis that the selectmen would look at to make that decision? Because it's difficult in Massachusetts. They came up with this number 2.5, which was magically pulled out of a cloud somewhere.
So we've already, we've gone round and round about this, but the proposal for the override that will be before town meeting is a $3 million override in which we only appropriate $1 million in the first year. So there will be Article 6 will say, hey, we're going to have if we pass an override for an additional $1 million, here's how we're going to spend it.
Okay.
But we want to pass an override for more than the $1 million because we don't need it next year, but we're going to need it the year after and the year after,
Yes.
right? So
That's
we don't
like
want to be going to
insurance.
we don't want to go into overrides. I think one of the things that's so hard about the override is people don't understand the levy limit and how
Yeah.
the levy limit works. And
Right.
I will try to explain it, but the levy limit is confusing to people. But the override allows you to grow the levy limit, but you don't have to tax all the way up to the
No.
levy
The
limit.
levy
You tax
is-
up to what is appropriate.
What
at
is
town
levy? Let's talk, that's
So the
not
levy
a common
is-
word that we all use.
So I'm gonna try
Yeah.
to make this simple.
Betty and I will help you.
Okay. So the tax levy is the amount that the town can tax, that can appropriate in, get in tax revenue for property taxes, right?
Right.
So your tax levy is your property tax base. Our tax levy is around $30 million.
And that's based on what's possible to,
No, this is just based on history. This is like
Okay.
history. Our levy limit is $30 million. You're allowed to grow the levy limit by 2.5% every year. So you're growing the levy limit by 2.5% a year, but you don't have to tax all the way up to the limit.
Sure.
Now, we do tax all the way up to the limit every single year because we don't have enough money.
Right.
So a lot of people have a hard time with, like, the levy limit is the amount of money, the bucket of money that we are allowed to get in taxation.
Right.
it's like
Now-
your payroll, I mean, you're like your salary.
But it's the big bucket of money, right? But the part that makes it confusing is people think that their assessed value
Right.
of their home changes the levy limit. It does not.
No, it does not. That's so important to understand.
Right.
It does not.
So you have a levy limit where I'm going to simplify it to say we have a $30 million levy limit.
Okay.
So we have a $30 million levy limit. What we do is we look at the valuation of all of the homes. So the assessors have done their job. They've evaluated all the property in town and they say we have, I don't know what the number is, but we have whatever millions of dollars of property value. So we have a $30 million levy limit. We have a property value that's this much. That calculates the tax rate. Last year is 8.13 per thousand, right? Which is lower than it was the year before.
Right.
And the reason that the tax rate was lower than the year before is because the property values went up quite a bit. So your valuation of your home, the assessed value of your home, is really about what part of that bucket or that pie you're getting. So if the $30 million is a pie, that your home value is what percentage of that levy is your home responsible for.
Right.
And a lot of people think, oh, my house went up in value by 50%. My taxes went up 50%. They did not go
No.
up 50%. When your assessed value went up, the tax rate went down.
Right.
Now, it did go up because the school bonding hit.
Right.
So that's just another part of
They
the
have
confusion.
additional expenses.
We
right?
have, because you have the pie that is the property tax amount,
Right.
but then we also have a debt exclusion, which made the pie a little bit bigger for the term of that project.
You want ice cream with your pie.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, right. So we have ice cream on the pay. We're paying separately for the ice cream
Right.
to add it on. We're paying separately.
And if you
for
have
that.
chocolate sauce on the ice cream, you gotta pay for that too. All of the extras, which are once in a lifetime kind of experiences, like a new school, you don't do that every year.
And that, the debt exclusion for Diamond, the debt exclusion for
Yeah.
the school, that part of the taxation only lasts until the bonding is paid for. Now, it's gonna be 30 years, so
Yeah.
it's a long time. But, whereas an override will continue, but the override sets the size, the levy sets the size of the pie. An override will let us make a little bit bigger pie. And then your valuation would be what percentage of that you are paying,
Right.
your home is paying.
And I think because it's outside of people, you understand what your income would be if you're getting a paycheck or you're getting your Social Security, but the taxes seem outside of that, but it really is money coming in, money going out. And those are the important things that I think people want to deal with. Is it going to be impossible for me to pay what's owed? And that's, I think, that's where it hits people that struggle. But for a lot of people who really don't feel this is that expensive a taxed town, they'll say, I can do that. Then they want to know what they're going to get for their money and what's the importance of all of that. At the town meeting, we try to tell those stories.
At the town meeting is the one that decides
Yes.
where the money is spent. I think this is where
Yes.
so few people participate in town meeting because I don't think they really understand how important your
It's
vote
the
at town meeting
legislature,
is.
yes.
Yeah, it's because when you go to town meeting, any person at town meeting can say, time out, I want to cut this budget by however much, and I want to add it to that budget for however much. And I'm glad a lot of people don't do that because we spend a lot of time trying to balance the budget and trying to make compromises and stuff. There's a lot of people that work really hard on the budget. But if you don't like where your tax dollars are being spent, I sure hope you've been at every town meeting and that you have been making proposals for adjustments to that. And if you haven't, then shame on you.
And if you haven't grown up in a place in New England where you had a chance to experience a town meeting,
Right.
where your own presence makes a difference and
Yes.
your own opinion can make a difference, you really don't understand the power that you have. So I hope people really start to think about town meeting as their
A lot of
opportunity
people
to
think
make
town
it
meeting
there.
is boring. If you don't understand what's going on, it's kind of boring. I don't find it boring at all. I find it very fascinating.
Well, it is your town, and if you want to have a part, make it, I think people love the play Our Town. It's very nostalgic, and it sort of makes everybody feel like they're involved. But most of us feel like it's the town we have made a commitment to, and what we do in this town is what really matters. And the variety of choices we have in this town, but we still have to pay for it. It still costs money. And I don't think that the reality that all of us contribute is clear. It isn't just you that pays taxes.
Sean, I wanted to add a little bit more to the levy limit, and then we use the term just so often, debt exclusion.
Yeah.
And what does that mean, basically, from an override? What is the difference? I mean, a debt exclusion means that you pay more taxes for a certain period of time for something
Right.
specific.
It's like a mortgage.
Okay, so it's similar, but it doesn't come out of the budget, and it doesn't affect the budget directly in that way. So you pay for it in a different way by borrowing.
When I was young, even when I was a young adult, we didn't use a credit card. I mean, getting a credit card was a big deal. That wasn't something. Nowadays, everybody has
Just to be
has
clear,
more than
the town
one.
doesn't have a credit card. We no, we don't. We
And-
can't. We have to have a balanced budget every
But
year.
in
We
the
balance
sense
budget
of
every
not taking out of your wallet, a credit card is a different way to use your money. Debt exclusion is a different way to make an
I would say a
expense.
debt exclusion is more like you have your paycheck and you have some diverted to a savings account.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So, or your 401k, right? So you have your paycheck, but you're skimming, 2% or 4% or whatever off it is that you're putting in your 401k, right? So a debt exclusion is like it's coming out of taxation, but it's specifically earmarked for that
Yes.
specific thing.
Right.
So it's not like you're borrowing money. It's you're just taking some money from taxation that is specific to that project, and you can't not spend it on that project. So you see, if we're paying for the school building or the Diamond building or the police station or the fire station, it has to be spent for that purpose. You can't just keep spending it on.
And again, it's the voters who make the decision. I mean, you hear, why do we have this building? Well, the voters wanted it. I mean, it's just, if you don't vote, you don't have any excuse whatsoever.
Absolutely.
So, I mean,
Absolutely.
and you can lose in your vote, that's possible too. But I think as Shauna said earlier, we have so much more influence here. 250 people going to town meeting, we're one of 250.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
It really
if you
is.
think about it. So
'Cause
people need to
voting,
take advantage
It's so
of that.
powerful to
Yeah.
be able to do that.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, it's so powerful to be a select person who is really
People
looking
don't
at all
really
these
have
things.
all that power. I think that was actually one of the things I learned about local government is the select board really doesn't have that much authority. We really don't. But what we have a lot of influence. So we are out in front and we certainly direct a lot of conversation, but our actual authority is pretty limited. We can't spend any money that isn't appropriate.
Town
at
meeting has the authority.
Town meeting
Town
has the authority.
meeting, yeah.
The select board does like the contracts, so the not school department contracts, so like the labor union contracts, we do that, the negotiations for the labor union contracts, the employment contracts, those kinds of things. We appoint committees, but we really don't have that much direct power. It's mostly influence. Like we send a budget to the finance committee, but the finance committee can tear it apart and do whatever they want with it.
Yeah.
So there is.
It's really kind of amazing that it all works when you think about it. All of these people somehow are doing all of these things in almost stance step, but not really, because they could always change. You've made a decision, you send it there and it changes. I don't think the public understands how much work goes to pull it all together. And you're going to pull it all together for us in a couple more weeks, right? Or you're going to do it
the
tomorrow.
select board, this is actually, so the select board's already done. We're done with the budget.
Okay.
We proposed our budget. What we've done is sent our budget on to the finance committee.
Okay.
The finance committee is the one who's going to finalize the vote. We actually do have a select board meeting tomorrow to just finalize the warrant because the finance committee has different numbers for some of the articles, and we want to put their numbers in the warrant so as it's not confusing.
Okay.
They met
But-
last night.
They
The
met last
Finance
night, they
Committee.
changed an article, and so we're just gonna ratify their changes, because we don't wanna be confusing. There's not like a select board proposal and the finance committee proposal. The one that's before a town meeting is the finance committee proposal. Anybody can change it, you can change it at the floor, but.
Well, you have to be supported. It's not one person changing.
No, not one person has to make the case and try to get town
Right.
meeting to agree to
Right.
make the amendment, yeah.
We don't want to have one person disappointed when nobody else gets behind them. But you think this is an unusual year, having the need, the real clear defined need to increase the money that the town has
The-
available?
We have had this problem. I've been involved in local government for like 12 years now, and we've had this problem every year.
It was in the master plan in 2016, so
Yeah.
yes.
We have
it's
had
been
this
a
problem, and what's happened is we've done everything we can do to find little bits of money that are hanging out, to deplete the library special accounts, to deplete the council on aging accounts, to keep short staff at different departments, to raise fees where we could. We've done everything that we can do now. So I actually don't believe that we're going to be able to get by. We can make it for FY24, because in the FY24 budget we do have this balanced, and we do know what that looks like. But FY '25, we're going to have significant cuts in service if there is not. There's just no more. There's no more place to find it different money.
And that's the reality that people have to understand. The fireman is not going to be there saying.
I can tell you, we had a lot of people that were very interested in making sure that we had 2 school resource officers, but we don't have the budget to pay for 2 school resource officers right now. So if you believe the school resource officer is important, you need to come out and vote at town meeting and make sure that there's this SROs there.
And also, yeah, there already have been cuts. It just hasn't
Yeah.
been discussed that
Well,
much. I mean, look at the size of the highway department, and back to my cemetery department. I mean, you have two to 3 people, and they're all weekend. They have to work on weekends. They do an awful lot. So here we go.
We were just talking about Bernadette. She is an outstanding member of our community for 23 years. Come on in.
24.
Come on in. Come on in. Welcome.
Thank you for
First of all, we want to thank you publicly.
Thank you.
Saying how
Thank you very
wonderful. The town would be in terrible shape unless you gave that extra mile, which you seem to do. You have results for us?
I do.
Wow! Come on in. Come on down.
Okay. So, we will start at the beginning.
Let's get you hooked in to the electronic.
Okay.
Just put it on your, excuse me. See if I can get you connected to the electronic world. There we go.
Okay, so today's results from the April 11th town election are as follows. So the Board of Selectmen, the top 2 vote getters were Stephen Willett and Manuel Soers. Clapping. Town clerk, the top vote getter was Kristen Stinson. Assessor, of course, Peter McGar, because he was unopposed. Donna Amaral was unopposed for Board of Health. Evan Gendro was unopposed for School Committee. Paul Jennings unopposed for Regional School Committee. Sean Leach is unopposed for Fish Commissioner. The 2 constables were unopposed, Arthur Caesar and Marshall Ronco. Trustee of the Free Public Library. So we had a race of 3 for 2 spots. The 2 top vote getters were Pauline Dooley and Paula Feidelberg.
Congratulations.
Wendy Henderson was unopposed for Landing Commissioner, and John Bullard was unopposed for Planning Board. The Commissioner of Trust Funds was total write-ins, so I don't have those figures because I don't have those tally sheets yet. So, we have 3 races. Oh, and how could I forget the question?
You can't forget the question.
The diamond question. The vote getter was yes. 1,039 yes votes and 668 no.
Yes. Feeling very happy with the results.
Okay?
And they came in early, but what was the total number of voters?
1,801 voters, which was approximately a 13% turnout for the town.
Great,
Much better than last year.
great.
Much better than last year.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
These posted,
I will be posting it on the town website tonight.
okay?
Okay?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And I want to thank the townspeople for voting me as town clerk 3 years ago, and I want to thank them all for giving me such a great.
Be heard with that mic.
Oh, I want to thank everyone for electing me 3 years ago and for allowing me to serve the community, and I'll see you around town.
Thank you.
We really got our money's worth with you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. Well, we have had an amazing chat. We've covered almost every important thing we could think of tonight. I want to tell everybody who's watching, tomorrow night, if you've been excited, come to the public forum for the Cable Advisory Committee's license renewal conversation. This is in process. You're allowed to come, listen, hear, and even ask a question or two. It's at 6 o'clock tomorrow night at the Town Hall Annex. Thank you, Shauna, so much. I think
you for
we've
doing this,
helped
Irene.
better people understand a little bit better. And Betty, you're not
Thank you,
here
Betty.
where we can see you. But again, congratulations to the volunteer of the year, or at least the leader of the band, and thanks for being part of our conversation. Okay, good night, thank you, come again. We'll be here next year, same time.